There's no time to argue about time. We don't have the time. And, well, here we are. I'm Sean Ferrick for TrekCulture, and here are 10 terrible ways to time travel. Number 10. Romulans and radiation exposure. If you're interested in using the O'Brien must suffer time travel method, you're going to need two things. A dose of Delta Series radioisotopes from an exploding plasma conduit, and a quantum singularity in orbit of your location. You'll meet your future self and then some. Must remember, avoid panels on the habitat ring and basilar arterial scan. Basilar arterial scan! The mode of time travel in Visionary might be distinctly unadvisable, but it does work as a clever enough central conceit for a fun episode. It allows O'Brien to hop into the future with just enough, but not too much, regularity to keep the mystery going. And ultimately, decades-old spoiler alert, to save the station from destruction at the hands of those scheme-loving Romulans in their warbird. The real problem is the damn deadly radioisotopes. The original O'Brien of the present succumbs to radiation poisoning and is replaced with his future self, thus joining the duplicate club alongside Harry Kim. The freelance writer Ethan H. Cook, who came up with the idea of Visionary, had a thing, it seems, for terrible time travel methods, as he also has story writing co-credit on the episode Children of Time. We all remember how that dreadfully disastrous the temporal tambourings were for Gaia. Number 9. The Atavachron. You certainly won't find this at your local library, assuming you still have one. A fairly neat solution to an explosive problem for the pre-warp inhabitants of Sarpedon. That is if they chose to go willingly. The Atavachron is still a lousy way to time travel. Down on Sarpedon, in All Our Yesterdays, Kirk, Spock and Dr. McCoy meet one lone librarian, Mr. Atos, as in I don't give a, when it comes to explaining what those data disks are really all about. Thinking they're just having a browse without borrowing, the trio soon finds themselves on the other side of the Atavachron time portal at different points in Sarpedon's past. Naturally, Kirk is almost immediately getting himself locked up and also has to put up with some pretty dodgy accents. He's a witch! 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 Nope, still can't place it, my lord. Spock and McCoy have it worse off, however, in Sarpedon's Ice Age. Aside from trapping unsuspecting Starfleet officers, the regular operation of the Atavachron meant making changes to the user's cell structure and brain patterns that prevented them from returning from the past. Thoroughly unprepared for the trip, Kirk, Spock and McCoy would die within hours if they didn't make it back to the future, where Sarpedon's sun was about to blow up. Plus, 5,000 years ago, Spock went all weird again. Great episode, not so great type of time travel. Number 8. Chemos cargo. Okay, so when it comes to methods of time travel, this one did produce some particularly fun results, but practically speaking, it was still a monumentally terrible way of doing it. As side effects of Quark's scheming go, things could also have been worse. It's 3 Ferengi, Chemosite, contraband, tall ships and tall tales, a stowaway, and a little bit of sabotage on a trip to Earth. Oh, and our Tom be warned, the Zoomox in this one. Rom's a genius now. Fair enough. Well, he's always been smart, just a little underconfident. They'd definitely all be dead without him. Quark has ever so generously offered up his new ship, brought for him by his nothing but trustworthy cousin Gala, so they're taking Nog to Starfleet Academy in style, and leaving Morn in charge of the bar. Good luck getting him to shut up and sell some drinks. This terrible time travel comes in when the warp drive won't shut down and the ship is about to fly apart. No problem though, all they need to do is vent plasma from the warp core into the chemosite to cause a cascade reaction, then modulate that reaction to create an inversion wave in the warp field, which should push the ship back into normal space. Suffice it to say, the Ferengi trio, and a very persistent dog, find themselves in a post-war pickle in Roswell instead. Number 7. Temporal Transporter. Judging by this, and another entry on this list, it doesn't seem like they've quite ironed out all of the kinks in time travel by the 29th century. Perhaps if they'd spent a little less time naming temporal paradoxes and a little more time working on the transporters, they wouldn't have all those former, current, future captains to arrest. Pop quiz. What causes the chronoton flux of .003? Answer, it's the last traces of the crew of the timeship Relativity and all is not Wells-class vessel beaming you from a seemingly wherever and whenever they like. The Relativity was helmed by Captain Braxton, the one who gets the 4 crimes you're going to commit treatment. His future self had been dipping into Voyager's timeline trying to destroy it. And never mind the headaches, but probably those two. This molecule mixing method of time travel will give you a debilitating sensory aphasia before it causes full-blown temporal psychosis. Lieutenant Duquesne warned 7 of 9 as much. If, whilst you're back in the past, you encounter any interference that affects the transporter lock, you might also find yourself dead on the other side of the temporal threshold, only to be recruited again for the 3rd time, which is most definitely not a charm, eh? Number 6. The Nexus. We've already spoken about the truly trippy faux nirvana that is the Nexus in 10 most mind-bending spatial anomalies, but it deserves a second mention here as an especially dire, and notably niche, means for time travel. Sure, once you're in, you can create any moment of your past, present or future, but that's all just smoke and mirrors. As pure time travel, in terms of methods, the Nexus can also drop you off at any point in history in the real world, but none of that is worth the effort of getting into it in the first place. The energy ribbon that provides access to this phony heaven only passes through our galaxy every 39.1 years, so you'll have to wait. Even then, you'd still have to track the bloomin' thing down. Flying a ship directly into the Nexus is a very risky proposition, so if you're anything like a certain Soren, you'll have to make it come to you by destroying a star or two and not being overly concerned by killing countless millions on any inhabited worlds. A mere inconvenience for you on the way to your joy blanket. The Nexus is then best seen as a metaphor for addiction. The feeling of pure atemporal euphoria it procures will trap you inside, unless, as for Picard in any case, you have the external help and the will to leave it all behind. Something which is far, far easier said than done. Number 5. Q. Q. Just Q. They are a method unto themselves. If it's not John Delancey's version happy snapping his and your way across time, then it's his on and off screen son causing temporal chaos at the click of a finger. What you don't have, Aunt Kathy, is unlimited control of space, matter and time. Q, the humanity on trial incarnation, was equally as fond of a quasi-historical recreation as he was of pure time travel. Another Q, Quinn, once tried to traverse the timeline in an attempt to escape his jailers, the Q continuum itself, throwing Janeway and crew back to the baryonic birth of the universe. Most examples of John Delancey's Q in the role of temporal trickster seem to have come with a lesson that all those involved could have done without learning the hard way. In Tapestry, Q and Picard only got to the heart of the matter after a stay in a new timeline and a trip back to the monster Maroons. In All Good Things, Q and the Continuum had the galaxy on tenterhooks with logic-defying temporal anomaly. By the time it came to Star Trek Picard's second season, the eponymous playmate had had enough of Q's bullshit, only to get a slap across the face. Technically, Q did save a lot of lives, including Elnor's and, in a very roundabout way, billions across the galaxy, but the time travel was all still very convoluted. Q's actions also led to the next terrible method on this list. Number 4. Slingshot with Borg Queen. The slingshot, or light speed breakaway factor effect for temporal displacement, is almost frighteningly common in Star Trek. No doubt the best known example of the procedure was to get the Bounty back to the 80s, where the whales at, in Star Trek IV, the one with the whales, but slingshot was in fact first used in the original series episode Tomorrow is Yesterday to get the Enterprise home, and in Assignment Earth for that historical research that we just don't really talk about. It is also featured quite copiously in beta canon. It's not so much the technique itself that's bad, although accelerating a starship around the gravity well of a star at countless times the speed of light is certainly no warp in the park. Oh, Jack. And seriously can't be good for your health. It's more the fact that if Spock isn't on hand to help with the calculations, the next best, and really only option, becomes a Borg Queen. Oh, go on then, let's chance it. You only live once, unless you're snapped back into existence by Q. Surely there are more intelligences who can isolate the divergence and microshift for any chronotonic radiation, as Dr. Jurati put it in Penance. 7 of 9 was right there in the room, and she's pretty darn smart in any universe. Even if Jurati did eventually manage to change things, taking any version of the Borg Queen with you on a trip anywhere, or when, is just a truly terrible idea. Number 3. Artificially generated Temporal Rift. Captain Braxton's at it again, or rather, he's at it for the first time in the strict and most forward-flowing chronologies. Yet another time travel method from the 29th century that can, especially in the wrong and untrained hands, cause the most calamitous of catastrophes The destruction of Earth's solar system, for one. The use of a phrase, far out, for two. Captain Braxton's time travel technique in Future's End was Temporal Rift, artificially generated by his single-occupant timeship Eon, another on-the-nose vessel name for the 29th century time police. Far from preventing the catastrophe, Braxton was the cause of it. Well, actually it was Henry Starling, sly entrepreneur and winner of worst use of Photoshop several years running, who will fly the uncalibrated Eon into the future before Captain Janeway's photon torpedo badassery. But that means nothing without Braxton's intervention in the first place. Ow. A B that leads to C that leads to A, as Braxton himself admits in late 20th century Santa Monica. Yeah, we get it. Mostly. It's worth noting that alternate future Admiral Janeway used a relatively similar and equally terrible technology, nabbed from a particularly pissed off Klingon, to get to the past for shindigs with a younger self. The chrono deflector burnt out en route, so the whole thing was a one-way trip. Number 2, Picard Squared. Never meet your heroes, they say. In this case, we get 2 Captain Picards, quite literally for the price of 1, when the Enterprise D finds a Federation shuttlecraft where it shouldn't be. For Prime, let's call him, Picard's psychological trauma alone of having to shoot his doppelganger from the future, this is a truly awful method of time travel, although at least that Picard wasn't at the other end of the phaser. Moreover, the mere 6-hour hop into the past afforded by the energy vortex in Time Squared included the loss of the future Enterprise D with all hands, bar this ill-fated Picard. Having witnessed the destruction of his ship, future Picard then had to wake up in a nightmarish world where the clocks don't match, only to be interrogated and berated by his former self in his semi-conscious state. We have apparently intersected with something. Very supplemental log there, Prime Picard, thank you. There's a being of some sort inside this something that now wants both Picards. As with a lot of terrible methods of time travel, the only way forwards is backwards to the beginning, on the same course to Endicor. Number 1, Daniels. On the NX-01, there was a 2-man time travel show, except when T'Pol was roped in for a let's confuse trip to Detroit, in which one of the protagonists was a relatively unwilling participant, or rather, rarely had any choice in the proceedings. Temporal agent from the 31st century, for whom time had, and will have, a very different meaning, the dubious Daniels would often decide to dispatch Captain Archer, in particular, back and forth in time whenever he pleased. Plucked from the present without being asked, Archer was just trying to go about his day or get some sleep in the traditionally linear fashion. Going to bed in your skivvies in deep space, then waking up on Earth 10 months ago, shirtless in pajama bottoms, has really got to mess with your mind. On balance, Daniels was more of a help than a hindrance to the Enterprise and crew. Nevertheless, in addition to the disappearing Archer phenomenon, his time portal method for time travel was distinctly dangerous and unreliable. On one occasion, it left both him and Archer stranded on a post-apocalyptic 31st century Earth. Then, things got even worse during a stormy layover in an alternate World War II. Let's just say that version of Daniels won't be going back to serving scrambled eggs. Was that enough to scramble your brain? Certainly was enough to scramble mine. Thank you very much, Jack Kiley, for writing this, and don't forget to check out his article over on whatculture.com. Thank you so much, everyone, for following along. You're awesome, you are wonderful, and whether you are just now starting this article because of the absolute joy of time travel, I hope that you enjoy it.